I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair is authorized to call recess at any time. Over the past 25 years, charter schools have emerged as the single most impactful reform in American public education. Designed to provide public, tuition-free alternatives with increased flexibility in exchange for accountability, charter schools have grown from a handful in the early 1990s to over 8,150 schools serving more than 3.7 million students nationwide by 2024. In addition to providing parents with meaningful choices for their children, research shows that charter schools have particularly benefited low-income students and students of color in urban areas, creating new and innovative education models, extended learning time, and higher college readiness rates. Indeed, a 2023 study from Stanford's Center for Research on Education Outcomes showed that in math, charter school students learn the equivalent of an additional 6 days per year, and in reading added 16 days of learning. The results are especially striking for at-risk students. Students in poverty achieve an additional 23 days of learning and reading and 17 days in math. Many charters have narrowed or even eliminated achievement gaps. Results like these are remarkable. As the recent Nations Report Card made clear, our education system has been in a state of steady and alarming decline. But charters are a rare bright spot. It's uncommon to find widespread education innovation that succeeds, helping millions of students year after year, but charter schools do exactly that. And the benefits of charter schools go beyond just academic results. Charters open doors to innovation for teachers and administrators. Charter school autonomy encourages teachers to pioneer fresh teaching methods, schools to develop better hiring practices, and educational boards to innovate in budget management. Charter schools also make it easier for parents to find schools aligned with their family's values. Perhaps that's why a national survey found that 81% of parents support expanding the number of slots in existing charter schools in their area, and 78% want more charter school offerings in their area. Today, we'll hear testimony about charters across the country that are getting amazing results for their students. We'll hear that charter schools are among the best educational options for high poverty and minority students. We'll hear expert testimony that charter schools actually motivate traditional public schools to improve because of the healthy effects of competition. Indeed, there's a tipping point for charter school enrollment in a given region that lifts up all students, whether they're in charters or not. Yet somehow, despite this incredible record of success, charter schools have come under attack from certain elected officials and special interests who are intent on keeping students trapped in failing schools. Nowhere is this more evident than in my home state of California, a state that once led the way on charter school expansion, but is now ground zero for the assault on educational freedom. California has more charter school students than any other state, with over 700,000 children attending 1,281 schools. These schools serve over 12% of all public school students and overwhelmingly serve low-income and minority families. But since taking office, Governor Gavin Newsom has led a relentless campaign to dismantle the charter school success story. His administration has signed laws to block new charters, deny renewals, and choke existing schools with red tape and funding cuts. The two-pronged strategy is playing out as we speak. First, use state law and district politics to block new charter schools and deny renewals and expansions for existing ones. Second, strip successful schools of their autonomy and bury them under the very bureaucracy and labor constraints that have paralyzed traditional schools. The goal is clear: protect a failing monopoly by eliminating competition. Instead of replicating what works, politicians in California and other states are punishing success, and students are paying the price. Yet at this moment, we have an opportunity to support charters in powerful ways and expand their enrollment nationwide. Congress can pass the High Quality Charter Schools Act, which through strategic tax credits aims to vastly expand the numbers of proven, successful charters across the country. Specifically, the bill establishes a 75% federal tax credit for charitable contributions toward the startup costs of nonprofit charter school organizations that have a proven track record of excellence. If the High Quality Charter Schools Act were to become law, we would see tremendous schools like Success Academy and KIPP multiply across the country, with up to 6 million more students enrolling. This would be an enormous benefit, not only to those students, but to all students, as the expansion of charter schools, along with the private school choice enabled by the Educational Choice for Children Act, would be a powerful force for education reform across the country. And I do have to say, I was very disappointed when the text of the reconciliation bill for the Ways and Means Committee came out a couple days ago, that there was nothing for charter school families in that text. It was a tremendous victory to see the tax credit envisioned by the ECCA included, but it was incomprehensible to me that the bill would not seek to use this perhaps once-in-a-generation opportunity to expand the charter school movement across the country. We have Democrat politicians like Gavin Newsom or politicians in New York who have been attacking charter schools relentlessly despite their incredible success. And if Republicans are not willing to stand up for charters, then I don't know who will be. So I am strongly encouraging my colleagues to assure that the final text includes tax incentives to vastly expand the number of charter schools across the country. With that said, I'm looking forward to today's hearing. I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for attending, and I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses for being here. Charter schools, as a reminder, are public schools that receive taxpayer dollars. At their best, they offer potential for innovation, flexibility, and responsiveness to community needs. But at their worst, and too often in practice, they operate without adequate oversight, without sufficient safeguards for civil rights, and without the transparency required of traditional public schools. That matters because the consequences fall heavily on Black and brown students. This Saturday marks 71 years since the landmark Supreme Court Brown versus Board of Education decision, yet our nation still struggles to provide equitable access and opportunity for all students. Without meaningful guardrails, charter schools can become a driver of segregation, and we've seen this before. After Brown, resistance to integration took many forms: private segregation academies, neighborhood school policies, and later school choice plans. Today, we must ask whether we are repeating that history under a different name. The data is sobering. Charter schools on average are more racially isolated than traditional public schools in nearly every state and major metropolitan area. Research shows that the expansion of charter schools has measurably increased school segregation. It's reduced the likelihood that Black and Hispanic students attend school with peers of other races, and that racial isolation is often paired with economic isolation, compounding inequality. This is not a theoretical concern. Segregated schools are under-resourced schools. They're more likely to employ less experienced teachers, offer fewer advanced courses, and struggle to provide essential student supports. This harms not only students of color, but the entire promise of public education. Research shows that many charter schools face additional challenges. For example, teachers tend to be less experienced and have higher turnover rates than those in traditional public schools. Charter schools close at a higher rate than traditional public schools, and they have found in some cases to have higher risks of waste, fraud, and abuse than traditional public schools. I served in the Oregon legislature, and I was on a committee formed to examine Oregon's charter school policies and practices 10 years after our enabling statute passed. And we had many questions then that remain unresolved today, including how are charter schools determining which students to enroll, who serves on their boards, to whom are they accountable, what happens to students when charter schools close, and how can we prevent charter schools with poor outcomes, especially online charter schools, from proliferating. A November 2024 report by the National Center for Charter School Accountability and the Network for Public Education called Doomed to Fail, an Analysis of Charter School Closures from 1998 to 2022 found that more than 25% of charter schools closed within 5 years of opening. This increases to 49% within 15 years of opening. Several audits by the Office of Inspector General and the U.S. Department of Education identified problems with charter schools and charter management organizations, including conflicts of interest, lack of accountability of federal funds, waste, fraud, and abuse, and failure to provide students the services that are required by federal programs, and also unresolved compliance issues, among others. This hearing is not about attacking charter schools as a concept. It's about our responsibility to every student, our responsibility to guarantee that the growth of charter schools does not come at the expense of equity, inclusion, and civil rights, and the rest of the more than 90% of the students who attend traditional public schools. It's our responsibility to examine whether current policies help us move forward or if they reinforce the barriers we've spent generations trying to dismantle. Congress has tools to advance these goals. We have the Strength and Diversity Act and the Equity and Inclusion Enforcement Act that offer targeted supports to school districts that are working to develop, implement, and expand desegregation initiatives. And the bill I co-lead with Representative DeLauro, the Championing Honest and Responsible Transparency in Education Reform, or Charter Act, would prevent for-profit entities from managing charter schools and siphoning taxpayer dollars from children for their financial gain rather than for the benefit of the students they enroll. Together, these bills would help close achievement gaps, support integration and accountability, and fulfill the vision laid out in Brown. But we also must look beyond charter schools as part of the conversation. We should be asking what we can do to improve our nation's public education system for all students in all public schools to help them succeed to the best of their abilities. In 2015, we passed the bipartisan Every Student Succeeds Act. That law intended for funding to be directed to those most in need to address achievement gaps. ESSA provides flexibility to states and districts to determine how to make improvements, and it focuses on a well-rounded education that includes the arts and better quality assessment. But ESSA has never been implemented with fidelity since it was signed into law. That, I submit, would be a worthy task for this committee. It's also important to address the other issues that affects students' ability to learn, including hunger, mental health, and access to facilities that are free from lead and asbestos. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the irony of my Republican colleagues continuing their hearings about closing gaps and opening doors in education, while the president is actively dismantling the Department of Education and terminating grants for public education initiatives. President Trump's budget proposal invests additional funds in charter schools, but slashes $4.5 billion from other K-12 education programs, where, again, as a reminder, more than 90% of the students are enrolled. Republicans on this committee just voted to cut $330 billion from higher education, ending the student loan programs that truly open doors of opportunity for underserved communities. So I hope today we see a real commitment to making public education accessible, accountable, and exceptional for every student. Schools that receive public dollars must be part of a public education system that is accountable, transparent, and committed to equity. We cannot afford to ignore the evidence. If we're serious about giving every child, regardless of race or zip code, the opportunity to thrive, we must design our school system to deliver on that promise. I also look forward to the conversation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. 14 days after this hearing. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material noted during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I note for the subcommittee that some of my colleagues who are not permanent members of the subcommittee may be waiving on for the purpose of today's hearing. I'll now introduce our four distinguished witnesses. Our first witness is Mr. David Griffith, the Associate Director of Research for the Thomas B. Fordham Institute in Washington, D.C. Our second witness is one of the truly great education leaders in America today, Ms. Eva Moskowitz, the CEO and President of National Strategy and Advancement for the Success Academy Charter Schools in New York City. Our third witness is Dr. Genevieve Siegel-Hawley, a professor of educational leadership at the Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. And our fourth witness is Mr. Darryl Cobb, the president of the Charter School Growth Fund in Chicago, Illinois. We thank the witnesses for being here today, and we look forward to your testimony. Pursuant to committee rules, I would ask that you each limit your oral presentation to a 3-minute summary of your written statement. The clock will count down from 3 minutes as committee members have many questions for you, and we'd like to spend as much time as possible on questions. However, pursuant to Committee Rule 8D and committee practice, we will not cut off your testimony until you reach the 5-minute mark. I'd also like to remind the witnesses to be aware of their responsibility to provide accurate information to the subcommittee. I'll first recognize Mr. Griffith for your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Kiley, Ranking Member Bonamici, and distinguished committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is David Griffith, and I'm the Associate Director of Research at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, a nonprofit think tank committed to advancing educational excellence for all students. In the past decade, I have been involved in more than a dozen empirical studies of charter schools, which are also the subject of my forthcoming dissertation and book. As the charter school sector continues to grow, it's vital that we understand not only how these schools affect the students they enroll, but how they affect public education systems as a whole. Today, I'll share the latest findings from my own research as well as the work of other leading scholars. Collectively, these studies paint a clear picture. High-quality charter schools can produce meaningful, system-wide benefits for students. In recent years, numerous studies have found that enrolling in a charter school generates significant academic benefits, particularly in urban areas and for traditionally disadvantaged students. Importantly, this research suggests that, unlike nearly every other K-12 education program, the charter sector has improved as it has expanded for at least 4 reasons. First, the percentage of charter schools that are relatively new has declined, and new schools tend to get better over time. Second, a growing percentage of charters are affiliated with mission-driven nonprofits like Success Academy, and these charter management organizations have a particularly strong track record. Third, charter school policy has improved, as states and localities have learned from one another's experiences with more choice-based systems. Finally, many low-performing charters have closed. Critics of charter schools often claim that they harm traditional school districts, yet research by the Fordham Institute and others suggests that districts' revenues per pupil often increase as charter market share rises due to so-called hold harmless policies. Moreover, a substantial literature now suggests that district-run schools tend to improve in response to competition from charters. If both enrolled students and students in district schools benefit from charters, their system-wide effects should be positive. So, in a recent national analysis, I examined how marginal increases in charter school enrollment, or charter market share, affected the average achievement of all students in a public school system, including those in traditional public schools. Overall, the results suggest that these enrollment increases are linked to system-wide gains in both reading and math achievement by the end of middle school, especially in urban areas and for traditionally disadvantaged students. In short, charter schools are not a silver bullet, but they have demonstrated their ability to raise student achievement and improve public education systems. Broadly speaking, charter schools thrive under policies that prioritize quality over quantity, promote transparency and accountability, and provide equitable funding. I urge this committee to support such policies.
Thank you very much. I'll next recognize Ms. Moskowitz for your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee, for having me. It's a great opportunity, and I appreciate being here. My name again is Eva Moskowitz. I'm the founder and CEO of Success Academies. I started 19 years ago with 165 kindergartners and first graders. Today, I am educating 22,000 children across K through 12. Success Academy is the 4th largest school district in the state of New York. But what I'm most proud of is the academic outcomes. So we are number 1 in the state of New York in mathematics, including outperforming the most affluent school districts in the state of New York. We are number 3 in reading, again, not just closing the achievement gap, but actually reversing the achievement gap. 100% of our students for 8 years in a row have gone off to 4-year colleges. Whereas in America, only 22% of students take at least 1 AP. At Success Academies, 95% of our students have taken and passed 1 AP. And I'm here today to talk about what is that secret sauce, because it's much simpler than I think sometimes policymakers or the American public make it seem to be. There are lots of tools in the toolkit, from small class size to more money. I would argue that providing a structured, joyful, focused learning environment with an exceptional teacher training and education training program is really our secret sauce. Not only do we have rigorous academics in elementary school, but we have robust arts and athletics. And I should just clarify that 94% of our kids are Black and brown. 80% live below the poverty line, and I'm sure, as you can appreciate, living just below the poverty line doesn't mean that if you are slightly above it, you are a wealthy person. Our kids come from economically disadvantaged neighborhoods, and yet the bar is held high, and they do exceptionally well. I appreciate, Chairman, your advocacy of the High Quality Charter Schools Act. I don't see how we can be for universal school choice if we don't include both private school choice and public school choice, and unfortunately that was left out of the equation, and I'm hoping that it can be put back in, because this is a unique opportunity to materially impact the lives of children. This bill would create and benefit up to 6 million children. And we can talk about policies in the future, but we are losing the global educational competition now. America is at a low point, a historic low point when it comes to educational outcomes. And so there's, I feel, a tremendous sense of urgency to correct course quickly, and these companion bills would give us an opportunity to pragmatically, in a common sense way, advance the cause of children. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll next recognize Dr. Siegel-Hawley for your testimony.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Genevieve Siegel-Hawley, and I'm a professor in the School of Education at VCU. I'll be testifying in my personal capacity today. Over the past decade and a half, I have studied school segregation and policy options for addressing it. Because charter schools grew rapidly during that period, as well as broader interest in the idea of school choice, both have been an important focus of my work. This morning, I will outline the persistence of deep inequality and lack of civil rights protections in our charter schools, and how the federal government could better protect students, families, and their communities. My written testimony goes into considerable evidence-based detail about these issues, and I, of course, welcome further questions from the committee. Today, when I speak about civil rights protections or guardrails, I'm talking about the protections that are supposed to ensure that all of our children have equal access to educational opportunity, irregardless of their backgrounds. These rights are protected by our federal government through legislation like the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, passed by Congress because of exclusionary practices in our schools and communities. My basic argument today is this: charter schools receive public funding and therefore should be equally available to all students. Allow me to draw your attention to the persistence of inequality and lack of civil rights protections in charter schools along several key dimensions. Charter school segregation by race and class is stark and related to unequal educational opportunity. Black and Hispanic charter school students are more likely to attend segregated schools with draconian discipline, fewer challenging or college prep courses, higher likelihood of closure, higher teacher and leadership turnover, and less experienced teachers than Black and Hispanic students in our traditional public schools. While the charter sector disproportionately serves students of color, charter schools can also act as havens for white and middle-class flight. Charter schools are also less likely overall to educate students with special needs, and when they do, charters tend to educate students with less severe disabilities. Charter expansion impacts public school segregation and resources. In large districts where the charter sector expanded the fastest, school segregation increased the most. Resources funneled to the charter sector negatively impact public schools in both urban and rural districts. Importantly, charter school segregation isn't just a result of family preferences, who, for the record, support racially integrated schools according to polling conducted on the 70th anniversary of Brown. Charter school segregation is also a result of charter schools' choices, their preferences for certain kinds of students and families. Charter schools choose through targeted outreach, niche programming, requiring families to provide their own transportation, providing limited educational services, requiring family involvement, and arduous or criteria-based application processes. even though charter schools can shape enrollment to their advantage, unlike traditional public schools that must serve all assigned students. Charter school student achievement and outcomes remain a mixed bag. Civil rights guardrails for school choice can explicitly counter some of the ways charters shape enrollment and segregation. We already have long-standing bipartisan support for the Federal Magnet Schools Assistance Program, which is designed to create diverse learning opportunities. 4 civil rights guardrails are imperative before any additional funding is allocated. First, comprehensive outreach and interest-based unified user-friendly application systems so that all families can understand their choices and are able to easily apply for them. Second, free transportation to schools that have been carefully cited so that a racially and economically diverse set of families can readily get to them, with geographic enrollment preferences that encompass a similarly diverse group. Third, accountability for enrolling a diverse student population to include enrollment caps to slow growth linked to overall school segregation. Fourth, careful attention to student retention and belonging, including the provision of crucial student support and educational services for students with disabilities, multilingual learners, and for children who come to school hungry. Charter schools can be part of a thriving public school ecosystem, but the federal government has a crucial role to play to make this so. For charter schools to live up to their ideals, and I think my fellow panelists would agree with this general point, we need smart regulation and oversight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lastly, I will recognize Mr. Cobb for your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Kiley, Ranking Member Bonamici, and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to participate in today's hearing during National Charter Schools Week. I'm Darryl Cobb, President of the Charter School Growth Fund, where I've spent the last 15 years focused on growing our nation's highest performing charter schools. Founded in 2005, the Charter School Growth Fund is a national nonprofit organization that identifies the nation's best public charter schools, aggregates philanthropic capital to fund their expansion, and helps to increase their impact to prepare all students, in particular students from underserved backgrounds, to realize their full potential. The Charter School Growth Fund portfolio includes over 1,400 high-quality charter schools serving more than 760,000 students across 34 states, and 75% of those students come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. We support a diverse set of educational models, college prep models, STEM, classical, language-focused models, health-centered models, career-connected models, and everything in between. At the Charter School Growth Fund, we are model agnostic, but we believe in strong leadership and strong results. And the evidence of these results is clear. The same 2023 study that the chairman recognized found that Charter School Growth Fund portfolio schools add an additional 61 days of growth in reading and 69 days of growth in math compared to their traditional public school peers. That's more than a third of a school year of additional growth every single year. In 2024, the Progressive Policy Institute found that cities that are significantly expanding charter schools have seen low-income students, whether they attend a charter school or a traditional public school, begin closing performance gaps with their peers statewide. It is clear that charter schools lift the tide for all students. Last year, members of the Charter School Growth Fund portfolio opened 61 new charter schools and increased enrollment by more than 60,000 students across the country. Over the last few years, a quarter to a third of all new charter school openings annually are by members of the Charter School Growth Fund portfolio. Many of these openings are fueled by the federal CSP program, which is administered by the Department of Education. CSP has been instrumental in fueling charter schools' growth. Also, the access to suitable facilities and federal tax-exempt private activity bonds, which allow reduced borrowing costs, remain critical to fueling charter school growth across the country. As you pursue your policy agenda, I'd like to leave you with 3 things. 1, public charter schools have shown benefit to all public school students in charter-rich environments, even those not enrolled in charter schools. 2, Students from traditionally underserved backgrounds have benefited the most from the innovations and the hard work of leaders founding charter schools. And 3, the federal government has and must continue to have a role in providing the policy environment and resources necessary for charter schools to thrive. Thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Under Committee Rule 9, we will now question witnesses under the 5-minute rule. I will first recognize the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Wahlberg of Michigan, for 5 minutes, or for his questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for holding this hearing, and thanks to our witnesses for being here. I think we heard great evidence on why charters are good for everybody. You know, the premise of my experience in education says to me that when you take care of the student, the parent, and the teacher, you'll succeed. And I think, Mr. Cobb, your concluding statements clearly indicated that that's what's going on in charter school. And thank God it's also helping the traditional, as we call it, public school students as well, because the competition. Any information that goes away from that reality is flim-flam. That's a technical term, Mr. Chairman, that I just threw out there. I mean, if you go back in the most recent NAEP, which segment of public education, which one segment of public education showed positive educational outcomes? The answer is charter schools. In Michigan, what I looked at in NAEP was horrifying to a state that led this nation in so many ways in technology and manufacturing, STEM areas, and we're falling behind because we're throwing caution to wind about supporting quality education opportunities. Mr. Griffith, in your testimony, you mentioned that high-poverty students tend to do especially well in charter schools. Why?
Well, I think there are many reasons, but I'll just highlight 2. First of all, many of these students are coming from some of the worst traditional public schools. So, you know, the counterfactual is not great, and they are looking for a lifeline, and they're looking for you know, just a place where they can get a basic education. I think the second thing that I would highlight is just high expectations. We did a study of charter schools in North Carolina, and we found that teachers in charter schools had systematically higher expectations of their students. And we all know that, you know, if you have low expectations for students, they will sink to those expectations. But if you hold high expectations for them, you know, they will rise to meet them. So those are the things I would highlight.
Surprise, surprise. Basic educational modeling. Thank you. Ms. Moskowitz, the Success Academy seems to be living out the name of the academy. What do you think are the key ingredients of the Success Academy model that could and should be replicated in other charters?
Yeah, and I would just echo my fellow witness and make it more concrete. We don't refer to our kids as kindergartners, but the college graduating class of 2041. And that's because as soon as they arrive on our campus, we are expressing our love for them, our belief that they can, and that self-esteem is going to come through achievement. It is only through the learning and the struggle that you build self-confidence in the schooling environment. And so we do have extraordinary expectations for students. It doesn't mean that their journey is linear, and we have kids who can be really successful in 3rd grade, and then they get to middle school, and they struggle with chemistry and physics, which we teach in middle school, and they need more tutoring. But fundamentally, we believe in structure, order, and teaching the habits of mind that are going to lead to success. And that is discipline, hard work, focus, and joy in learning.
Yeah, sometimes it takes failure to breed success as well. Thank you. Mr. Cobb, Could you talk more about why charter schools can be created around a unique vision and values, whereas that's harder to do in a traditional public school? Sorry to give you only 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's the basis of what makes charter schools so powerful. For every charter school that's created, there were a set of parents, a set of educators, and a set of board members who came together and said, we have a vision for how we can serve students better, and we're going to craft that vision into a school that specifically meets the needs of those students, their parents, and that community. So that's what all charter schools are rooted in, is that specific mission and vision for the students that they educate.
Amazing. Competition in America. Might work. Thank you. I yield back.
Ranking Member Bonamici of Oregon is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to extend a warm Oregonian welcome to Mr. Griffith. Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. Dr. Siegel-Hawley, thank you for mentioning magnet schools, because magnet schools, as we know, offer choice within the public school system. And the district in which I live, the Beaverton School District, has many wonderful magnet programs, and so you really have a level playing field there. But I wanted to ask you about something I mentioned in my opening statement, and that's the statistics about closure of charter schools. About 25% closing within 5 years, 49% closing within 50 years. So Dr. Siegel-Hawley, what effect do these closures have on students and their families? What options do they have when the school closes? And what happens if a charter school closes in the middle of an academic year? How does that affect students, families, and the local public schools? And I can ask you to be concise because I have some other questions.
Okay, thank you for the question. You know, my work hasn't specifically looked at the causes of the closure, but we have picked up on it in our study of suburban charter school segregation. We found that new charter schools were increasingly likely in suburban areas, and that charter schools were increasingly likely to close in suburban areas in our largest U.S. metros, and that particularly impacted Black and Hispanic students. I think we can look at qualitative and quantitative research to understand that the disruption that students, families, and their communities experience in the wake of abrupt closure is damaging. You know, if strong schools are built on trust and care and relationship, severing that relationship, especially mid-year, is really problematic.
Is it fair to say it's disruptive to the students and to the public school system if a charter school closes middle of the year?
Yes.
Thank you. So several of you have mentioned the Credo report, the 2023 Credo report, but I want to direct my questions to Mr. Griffith and Mr. Cobb. You cite that Credo report for the premise that students do better in charter schools than in traditional public schools. I'm sure you know that the methodology and conclusions of that study have been scrutinized and criticized by multiple education experts, including Diane Ravitch and other education experts. So we know that parental involvement contributes to student success, and some charter schools actually require or mandate parental involvement. So even assuming that the Credo report shows some benefits from charter schools, how do you factor in that students in charter schools typically have more involved parents, and could it be the parental involvement rather than the charter school model that makes a difference? Mr. Griffith and Mr. Cobb, I'll ask you that question.
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is that we don't actually observe parental involvement. I understand that there is a certain amount of parental involvement that is involved in applying to a charter school, but that's also true when you are picking a house or choosing what traditional public school you want your kid to go to. So, you know, I don't think we observe that directly in the data. I guess the other thing I would say is that, you know, Credo's methodology has been evaluated multiple times, including by NCES, and the upshot is that, you know, its estimates are essentially indistinguishable from those of a randomized control trial. So, you know, when it comes to these test-based outcomes, I think we should take it seriously.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want to get to Mr. Cobb briefly and then have one more question.
Yeah, I'll comment on your question around parental involvement. I think I would flip that around, and I think a lot of times people view, our charter schools have parents who are more involved. I think charter schools are intentional about creating more paths for parents to be involved in their students' education. So many of the schools that we work with, they go out of their way to create a multiple pathway model for parents to be involved. For parents who have lots of time, there are opportunities to be engaged in schools. For parents who have less time, they create a multitude of ways for those parents to be involved.
Understood, and
in
I
their child's
submit that that would be
education.
a positive thing to do for the 92 or more % of students who are in traditional public schools as well. Ms. Moskowitz, Success Academy seems to place a lot of focus on test scores. This is something I've looked at for a long time, including NAEP and PISA scores. I have to say that comparing PISA scores with US scores is worse than comparing an apple to an orange. It's more like an apple with a forest of trees, because we have 50 education systems and the PISA countries have one. They also have paid family leave, universal health care, and these policies clearly affect student outcomes. And regarding the NAEP scores, wealthier students typically do better than low-income students, and I submit that we should be focusing on poverty and these other policies if we truly want to improve public education. So I want to ask, because your focus seems to be on getting high test scores, what happens to students in your school if they don't get high test scores?
Well, I would disagree that the focus is just on test scores. We wouldn't do block play. We wouldn't treat games as a subject. We wouldn't have the investment in art and music, chess, dance, and athletics if we were just interested in test scores. But we do think preparing kids for tests are important, and we frankly think that the New York State tests, and I would argue most around the country, are table stakes. If our kids can't pass those tests, we are in deep, deep trouble, because the tests are not that hard. And what they're going to have to do in life is a lot harder. So I think we do need to pay attention to the low bar of state tests. We need to pay attention to the math scores, the SAT math scores. They're actually quite easy. And the fact that our students are not acing those tests should be a national embarrassment.
I yield back. Thank you for letting me go.
The representative from Utah, Mr. Owens, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. I want to start off by with a shout out to my home state of Utah. We lead in education because our teachers lead. We have a culture in which our students are first, and I think every state, every district that takes that on can see a great amount of improvement. We have one of the highest high school graduation rates in the nation. Utah students consistently outperform national averages on the critical benchmarks like the National Report Card from fourth grade math and 8th grade reading. One example of an exceptional Utah school is American Preparatory Academy, whose results consistently rank among the highest in Utah and won the award for the best charter school in the state. As a nation, we've entered a very exciting new era where every child, not just the lucky few, can access opportunities that fit their unique needs and abilities. And we're finally starting to view education the way we view other parts of our economy, through the eyes of the American consumer. It is a culture built on capitalism. Competition drives innovation, accountability, and better outcomes. In too many cities like Chicago, Baltimore, and New York, the education bureaucracies shield themselves from competition and have failed the very students they claim to serve. With 70% of 8th graders reading below proficiency, the choice is clear. Do we empower families with options or keep listening to the same broken system? I want to thank Mr. Griffith, Mr. Moskowitz, and Mr. Cobb. Thank you for your passion. Appreciate what you guys have put into what you do. You're risk takers, you're innovators, you think outside the box, and you bring the entrepreneurial spirit to something that we need to do so much better in education. So thank you for doing that. My parents, by the way, were educators, so I totally get to understand where that comes from. And I would say Success Academy is a remarkable place to visit. So thank you for that opportunity to do that also. Mr. Griffin, those who are committed to the one-size-fits-all complain about offering competition to neighborhood public schools. What does your research say about competition in public schools improvement?
I'm going to cite the broader literature instead of my research here. By my count, there are 13 studies that use student-level data that find positive effects. 7 that find neutral or mixed effects, and 4 that find negative effects. So the preponderance of the literature suggests that traditional public schools tend to improve.
And when you kind of look at it, just to make a statement, if you think about competition, when anything is competing, they try to find the best way to make sure the customer comes to them. That's the way it works in the capitalism system. So I'm not surprised. I think we need to understand that public schools are also lifted when there's competition. Mr. Cobb, you mentioned that cities aggressively expand high-quality charter schools saw their students improve, including those in traditional public schools. I've long thought it's been misleading and inaccurate to say that charter schools are an attack on traditional public schools. How do you respond to someone who says that your work is undermining the public education?
Well, the first thing I say is that charter schools are public schools. They're part of the fabric of public schooling in our country. They offer parents and students an opportunity to identify the school that is right and best fit for them, and a school that is designed to meet their particular needs. We see all over the country, including in your home state of Utah, several schools that specifically focus on students who have been left behind or not had success in the traditional system, and schools built for them, and those students thrive. I can think about a school, Wallace Stegner Academy, right there in Utah, where they have a student population that is much more disadvantaged than the rest of the state, and their student outcomes actually outperform the average student in the state of Utah. So schools designed just like that are the reason why charter schools are part of the education system and need to be expanded in all parts of our country.
Thank you. Ms. Moskowitz, if just real quickly, I have only 30 seconds. We talked about demographics of your school. Could you kind of highlight that? Because I think it's important for people to realize, those who are not familiar with New York, how many parents are waiting on a list to try to come to a school like Success Academy. Just a little background on that, please.
So last year, we had 28,000 applicants for 3,000 spots, and it's quite heartbreaking. The parents who lose the lottery love their children as much as the parents who win the lottery. So we don't have a demand problem, we have a supply problem.
Just want to say that I've visited your school. I remember going upstairs where Success Academy was and going downstairs the public school system, and the list was so much longer for those downstairs trying to get upstairs. So thank you for everything you do, for your innovation. I'm thankful that we'll finally put our kids first in our culture. So with that, I'll yield back.
The representative from Pennsylvania, Representative Lee, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As a proud product of public schools, I'm deeply committed to a public education system that supports every child's success. So I stand with all the students, the parents, the families, the educators, the community members who are working tirelessly to save their neighborhood schools from an administration that is determined to dismantle them. For many families, neighborhood schools aren't just an option. They are the best option. And if we're doing our jobs right as government officials, it would be the best options everywhere. I've toured neighborhood schools, public schools that have expansive libraries, state-of-the-art facilities, athletic and performance facilities, central heating and air conditioning, and so many school counselors that some focus exclusively on college admissions. I've also gone to neighborhood schools with curriculums that, quite frankly, fall short of some of their students' needs or erase their history or lived experience, taught by educators who were grossly underpaid in crumbling buildings with lead paint, no ventilation. And the only difference between some of those schools most of the time is the zip code. These high-quality schools are proof that we actually do know how to adequately resource neighborhood schools. Our country's refusal to equitably invest in Black and brown schools, our students' neighborhood schools, is an intentional and systemic choice. So when my colleagues across the aisle hold a hearing about how we need charter schools to replace failing neighborhood schools, we cannot let them off the hook from confronting why some schools are failing. So, Dr. Siegel-Hawley, based on your work examining school segregation, why is it that schools in poor Black and brown neighborhoods have systemically fewer resources than more affluent communities? And have charter schools generally improved this disparity or made it worse?
Thank you for the question. You know, I think your comments highlight deep and ongoing inequality in our traditional public schools. And I think the conversation here today reflects different diagnoses of the issues, of the causes. So on the one hand, we have a diagnosis related to the lack of competition. More competition will spur improvement in our traditional public schools. And then on the other, we have a diagnosis that racial segregation and concentrated poverty are the root causes of educational inequality. The research would suggest that those root causes remain, and charter schools that don't adequately address them are not systematically creating better opportunities for our most marginalized children.
Thank you. Black and brown students' neighborhood schools are not destined to fail, seems you're saying, but they've been sabotaged. And charter siphoning money from neighborhood schools is a part of that sabotage, even as we can recognize the success of some charter schools. Don't get me wrong, plenty of charter schools are great schools with diverse enrollment, inclusive curriculums, and countless resources. But when a new fancy charter opens, I think about the students left behind in neighborhood schools, now tasked with delivering the same educational services, but with fewer resources. Where charters can rely on zero-tolerance policies to expel students they deem too difficult, or implement untenable academic requirements to push out students they decide can't keep up, or simply not offer the services required by a student's IEP, neighborhood schools continue to accommodate every student's needs by law. I also think about the students that never had access to charters in the first place, students who are unhoused or transient or in foster care systems without a stable home, who don't have a parent with Wi-Fi or endless time to research schools and fill out complicated applications. Dr. Siegel-Hawley, very quickly, based on your testimony, it seems clear that charters don't consistently outperform neighborhood public schools academically, even while discarding the students neighborhood schools still have to serve. What concerns should we have about expanding a schooling model that often excludes the highest need students and can't consistently assure students academic success?
I think we need to pay careful attention to the way that charter schools are choosing their families. We can talk about school choice, but we need to understand how charters are choosing their students and families and put into place stronger oversight and accountability for the civil rights protections and guardrails that would ensure that all children are able to equally access them.
Thank you. I just want to say that the chair of this committee opened by saying that we need to protect a failing monopoly by eliminating competition. And I want to remark that public schools are not a monopoly because public schools are not a business and they should not be governed by a business model. We shouldn't have school leaders who call themselves CEOs. This kind of thinking is how we end up with the Secretary of Education who donated over $1 million to a charter school network yet doesn't know what IDEA stands for. The Trump administration is doing everything in its power, well beyond its power, to dismantle neighborhood public schools, cutting funding and so much more. And when this rampant disinvestment from public school impacts neighborhood schools, my Republican colleagues will hold yet another hearing about how the only solution for the children that they failed is to expand a schooling model that discriminates. We can do better. We can invest equitably in public education and serve all students while doing so. Thank you, and I yield back.
The representative from Guam, Mr. Moylan, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our students are our future, and we should, as a nation, be investing in that future. But these actions go beyond just spending. We need to make it easier to succeed and give our students more pathways by empowering families to make the decisions that are right for their students. Academic choice is important, and we should empower parents and families to make the choices that are best for their students. As elected officials, it is a duty to give our nation's students the best chance to succeed. In many cases, charter schools can offer something different from traditional public schooling. In Guam, there are two fantastic examples of this. Chief Herald Academy offers something no other school does, Chamorro immersion learning. Programs like these respond to the unique cultures of the student bodies they serve, contribute to our rich cultural landscape, and help restore and revitalize our native languages. Career Tech also leads, being the only trade-centered high school on the island. C-Tech empowers students to enter workforce with in-demand skills, college credits, and nationally recognized certifications. Programs like these prepare our youth for all options after completing high school, from high-paying trade jobs to college degrees and beyond. Mr. David, thank you for being here today, and early congratulations on finishing your PhD. In your testimony, you discussed charter schools' positive outcomes in serving traditionally underserved populations. What have you seen in your research about charter schools advancing social mobility compared to traditional public schools?
Well, again, I'm going to cite the vastly larger charter school literature that goes beyond my own work. We've focused a lot on test scores today, and that's partly because that's where the data is, and we can account for things comprehensively when we do that. But there is also substantial literature on other outcomes, including high school graduation, post-secondary outcomes, labor market outcomes, civic outcomes like voting, and essentially that literature overwhelmingly shows that charter schools have positive effects.
All right, thank you. Ms. Moskowitz, thank you. You highlighted in your testimony Success Academy's 100% college acceptance rate. How does that compare with New York City's traditional school system?
It's a little hard to tell exactly because there's a very high dropout rate in the district, but it's about 70% higher than most high schools in New York serving comparable populations.
So as a follow-up, in your experience, what has been the main driving factors for parents and families to choose charter schooling over traditional public schooling? What makes charter schools so attractive to parents?
Yeah, I wish I could say that parents are choosing success because we have science 5 days a week and because we have a robust chess and backgammon program, and we send 100% of our kids to college, but actually it's safety. It's the lack of safety in the district school system. There are food fights in the lunchroom. There are massive teacher absences in the schools. It's not, we offer something really robust, but most of our families are trying to escape a multi-generational failing school. Their grandmother went to a failing school, and then the mother went to the failing school, because that is the only option. And finally, when success goes into neighborhoods, and other charters, of course, too, there's finally an option, a non-failing, non-disorderly option. Now, once they come to success, we show the robustness of our program, but the motivators are actually fairly basic.
I thank you. I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Representative Wilson of Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Chairman Kiley, Ranking Member Bonamici, and thank you to our witnesses for your testimony today. I must state up front that I find your claims that charter schools outperform public schools to be not only misleading, but entirely deceptive and unfounded. I'm a former public school teacher, a public school principal, a school district executive director, and a school board member. The local public neighborhood school is the heartbeat of the community, and you're destroying that. Public schools are meant to educate everyone, students with disabilities, the gifted, the wheelchair-bound, the sick, the struggling, the shut-in, the orphan, the ungovernable, everyone. It's a big tent. Charter schools, on the other hand, cherry-pick and fall short of the promise. And I can tell you that that is unfair. The nation's first charter school was established in my district by Florida Governor Jeb Bush, the Liberty City Charter School. It lasted 3 years. And in my home state of Florida, we see charter schools exacerbate patterns of resegregation along racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic lines. Poor children are lumped together as for some kind of experiment. They are put into a petri dish, and they say that's good as long as they don't have to go to school with my white children. As we approach the anniversary of Brown v. Board of Education this Saturday, we cannot be in the business of rolling back the time and contributing to segregation, supporting charter schools. This is shameful. On top of this, poorly monitored charter schools have shown to deliver subpar academic results, to snatch money from our public schools and then wash their hands clean of any responsibility. During my years as an educator and an elected official, I have never found one charter school that had the same success as public schools, and I'm still looking. And teachers do not have the same educational background, credentials, training, nor experience as public school teachers. It's privatizing education for a profit. Profit by greedy nonprofits, religious groups, and segregationists. It's a shame that we continue to push our black and brown children to these schools. The marketing is insane. So as a former teacher, let's recap what we've learned. We've learned that charter schools are good at snatching taxpayer money that should be going to public schools, leaving the public school deprived of necessary resources. Then they peddle substandard education and never deliver. And when the damage is done, they shut down, close the doors, and leave nothing but chaos in their wake. That is what we get with charter schools. We simply cannot continue to regress into an educational landscape where we fail to keep the promises we made to our children. With that, I have a few questions. Dr. Siegel-Hawley, you mentioned that some charter schools engage in severe discipline policies. I can expand on that by pinpointing the receivers of that severe discipline are black boys. Isn't corporal punishment contradictory to the goal of promoting students' mental health?
I'll note that the representative's time has expired, but I'll permit you a brief response.
Yes. My response is yes, and I think traditional public schools and charter schools have work to do on discipline disparities and eliminating corporal punishment.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. My good colleague, Ms. Wilson, just said she is still searching for any charter school that outperforms any traditional public school. Well, I have good news. Your search is over. Sitting right in front of you is the leader of a charter school network that is literally #1 of all schools in the state of New York. Ms. Moskowitz, you mentioned that you got 28,000 applicants but for only 3,000 spots. So based on what I've heard from this side of the dais, perhaps from our Democrat witness, I'm sure what you do is you just do like an entrance exam, you take the 3,000 who do best, and you say, you guys get the spots. Is that right?
It's a random lottery, and we wouldn't know how well a 5-year-old is going to do on a state test. If you have those powers of prediction, you're a better educator than I am. So it's random lottery. We get what we get, and we educate every kid. And you know, we have 16,000 special needs, 12,000 homeless students, very high percentage of non-English learners. Our demographics look very similar to our co-located schools, district schools.
And that's the law, right? You have to do a lottery, or at least
That's the law.
That's the law. So you so you do the lottery. Have you ever, I know there have been studies done that actually look at what happens then to the students who win the lottery versus those who don't. It's sort of a natural controlled experiment. Have you ever looked at that, by the way, for Success Academy?
Yeah, we've done a couple of them. They're a little outdated now, but winning the lottery has a outsized impact on academic success.
And we got some statistics here from your schools. You've had 22,000 students, #1 in New York in math. You outperform all of the most affluent schools, #3 in reading. Your students, 100% go to four-year colleges, 95% take an AP class. You have a structured, focused, joyful learning environment with arts and athletics and chess and backgammon. And this all despite the fact that 80% of your students are below the poverty line. Given this incredible success, I'm sure that in Albany, there's just universal bipartisan, overwhelming support for success, and they're always asking you, what more could we do for you to help your schools expand? Is that what you've experienced?
No, being in a blue state has its challenges, and it's been a 19-year battle just to exist. I've been sued constantly. The teachers union has made life very, very difficult. There's a sort of deep connection in New York between the unions and the local elected officials. Everything from trying to shut the schools down to barricading, not allowing children into the school building. People have referenced Brown v. Board of Ed. I'm experiencing sort of the opposite, where union operatives have not allowed children to get into the building. So it's a pretty venomous debate, which is really, really unfortunate, because I do think this issue is bipartisan. I think we've got to put away some of these grand ideological battles. We are running out of time to materially improve the lives of children. All the international data, we can argue PISA, TIMSS, all the international data indicates we are in the bottom quartile.
Why do you think it is that there isn't the level of universal support for what you're doing that there should be?
Well, I think that it is, there are narratives that are super convenient. If poverty is the explanation, and don't get me wrong, poor kids are harder to educate and have challenges that many of us in this room couldn't possibly imagine unless we ourselves have come from poverty. It is a factor, to be sure, but it isn't dispositive. You can outperform your zip code if you provide rigorous curriculum, if you have loving, nurturing teachers and principals. But I think the reason it's so, there's so much animus is because entities like Success are proving that there's nothing wrong with the children, and that is super politically threatening. There is a problem with a system of delivery. You mentioned, Congressman, that we are co-located at Success. So on one floor, you have a failing district school, and then you have our school that is super successful. In the school you visited, we had 100% of the kids pass the test, and the co-located had 0. So it's not a small gap. It is a giant, giant gap. And we have to take that seriously and start to offer pragmatic, concrete solutions to this problem, or we won't have a great nation.
Very well said. Thank you very much. I'll now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Scott of Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Griffith, you said you're doing research. Has that research been peer-reviewed?
Generally speaking, no.
And you can, I think we can assume that there's some good charter schools and some bad charter schools. You concluded the charter schools had a positive effect. Did you rule out, rather than an effect, it was a correlation?
Yeah, I think you can rule that out. We probably don't have time to get into the methods, okay? But what is compelling for me, and the reason that I'm here, is that when you look within a school district and you just look at the correlation between the level of charter school penetration for a particular cohort of students The cohorts with higher levels of penetration consistently outperform those with lower levels of penetration in both subjects and for every subgroup. So I feel confident saying there's a...
schools. Well, you acknowledge that poor performing charter schools tend to close.
Yes, that's right. That leaves the good ones.
Okay, and how long do students have to get to attend poor performing schools before they close?
Well, I think it
How
varies.
long do these poor performing schools stay open before they close?
I think it varies, but I think one thing that's important to note is that closure rates have declined since the beginning of the movement. So if you had asked me the question, 20 years ago, I think there were higher rates of closure, but as the sector has it's matured, the closure rate has declined, and it's less than half of what it was in the beginning. So I also would defend the notion of some performance-based closure just on the grounds of consumer protection.
You'll acknowledge, I guess, that students were attending poor performing schools, then they closed, but until then, they just got a poor education. Ms. Siegel-Hawley, Virginia, welcome. It's good to see you. Are charter schools required to comply with state requirements on teacher qualifications?
Thank you for the question. If I may circle back to underscore something that you mentioned around peer review, I've been thinking about that in this conversation because we've been sort of talking past each other with some of the evidence, and there's questions about whether or not it's flim-flam. And I just want to say that peer review is the bedrock of scholarship because even though it takes a long time, and even though it isn't always constructive, it is the opportunity for a fresh set of independent eyes to look at and evaluate and strengthen your work. Now, I know policy cycles move really quickly, and it can be hard to get the peer-reviewed evidence in front of policymakers in time, and that is why there is a role for other kinds of research that can be quickly disseminated. But I think we have to put a premium on the peer-reviewed evidence, and I haven't necessarily heard that today across all of the conversation. In terms of the question about teacher quality in charter schools, I do think that there is a large and growing body of research evidence suggesting that charter schools employ younger, less experienced, and lower quality teachers, and that they leave faster, creating churn that is disruptive for students and their learning.
Thank you. Can you say a word about whether or not charter schools lead to more or less racial segregation?
I think the research on this is also clear. Charter schools have been around for 30 years, and over time, many different studies across contexts have shown that charter schools are more segregated than our already segregated traditional public schools, and that they increase overall segregation.
Do discipline policies have an effect on that?
Do discipline policies have an effect on that? They can in different ways. Charter schools can push students out. They are not required to educate them. And then that leaves the traditional public schools to educate those students.
As more and more students go to charter schools, what happens to the public support for public schools?
I've been thinking about this during the conversation today too. The idea that we could and should create niche schools that cater to different families' interests, beliefs, to the exclusion of other families, is antithetical to what the Supreme Court said unanimously in Brown about education being the very foundation of good citizenship. It is really hard to learn how to care about and share with people who are different from you if you are in schools where you're divided into these niche sort of systems.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I'll now recognize the ranking member for a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the witnesses. This has been an incredibly thought-provoking conversation this morning. We know as federal policymakers that the federal role in education is about equity, really equity of opportunity. And we can't ignore the racial and economic segregation that continues to define too many of our schools. We can't pretend that the consequences of inequity are theoretical when they are in fact visible in outcomes, in teacher turnover and resource access. This is about more than charter schools. It's about whether the public education system is serving all students. And although we may differ on the solutions, we should all agree that innovation must never come at the expense of civil rights. Charter schools should not be exempt from the responsibilities that come with public funding. They must be subject to the same standards of accountability, equity, and transparency as traditional public schools. That's not about limiting choice, it's about promoting fairness. And I'll note that we recently introduced a bill to ban corporal punishment in schools across the country. I invite anyone to join us on that. We also must move beyond the false choice between improving traditional public schools or holding charter schools accountable, because we can and must do that, do both. The schools must work for every student in every classroom in every zip code. And that means investing in proven strategies, strong accountability systems, diverse and inclusive schools, and retaining experienced educators, and comprehensive student support. And again, magnet schools have that potential to offer choice within a public school system with a level playing field. So Congress must pass the Strength and Diversity Act, the Equity and Inclusion Enforcement Act, and also, as someone who was here along with Mr. Scott, Mr. Wahlberg, and others in 2015 when we passed the Every Student Succeeds Act, that must be implemented with fidelity and not in name only. But legislation alone is not enough. We need the will to enforce it and have the courage to follow the data, especially when it challenges the status quo. We owe that to the legacy of Brown versus Board of Education, and more importantly, to the millions of students depending on us to have a public education system that delivers on its promise. And Mr. Chairman, I've been on this committee for almost 14 years, and over the years we've had many, many conversations, and I heard it again today, references to escaping, failing schools, or the worst schools. And I still don't know what that means, Mr. Chairman. A school is a building. If the students are not doing well in a school, we need to ask the question. As Ms. Moskowitz said, do they need art and chess and athletics? Are the class sizes too big? Are they hungry? Are they homeless? Is there lead in the water? Are there challenges facing them at home that need to be addressed? And again, a reminder, more than 90% of the students in this country go to traditional public schools. Our role as policymakers must be consider all of them, not just the small percentage of students whose parents have advocated for them for a charter school. So let's focus on how do we improve all public schools in the country, and I look forward to continuing that ongoing conversation, and I yield back.
Thanks very much. Thank you very much to all of our witnesses. I'm struck by the numbers for Success Academy, 28,000 applicants, 3,000 spots. Put yourself in the position of a parent who knows that by and large, there are certainly exceptions, but New York City traditional public schools do not achieve good education outcomes. Many are unsafe. But then you hear about a school, also a public school, tuition-free, that not only provides a good education, but outperforms all of the other schools in the state and fosters a good culture and is safe, and parents can have peace of mind when their child goes to school. But the very difficult thing is that your odds are so low just because the school is so popular. The odds, 3,000 out of 28,000, it's not all that much better than an actual lottery ticket. And based upon that turn of chance, a big part of your child's future hangs in the balance, and their ability to succeed in school, to go to college, to succeed in life comes down to the drawing of a lottery ball. But what if we made it so it wasn't that way? What if we had a school system throughout this country where all 28,000 of those applicants could actually get a seat at a school like Success Academy? What if every child in this country had the opportunity for that kind of education? We can start working towards that vision right now. We have an opportunity right now to catalyze a school choice revolution in this country. We already have, as part of the reconciliation bill, a groundbreaking form of private school choice with the Educational Choice for Children Act, but we need to assure that charter schools and public school choice is in that bill as well. What hangs in the balance is not just the future of millions and millions of students, but the future of our country as well, as we've heard today. The nation's report card shows that our public education outcomes across this country continue to decline. And think about what that's going to mean for our country 5 years, 10 years, 20 years down the road. We have an opportunity to reverse that decline right now and begin a new era of educational excellence in America. It's just a matter of mustering the political will to do so. So thank you again to our witnesses for testifying before the committee. Without objection, there being no further business, the committee stands adjourned.